One thing I want to say before we get into this newer video is make sure you check out the previous video. It has a lot more scientific information than the video that I'm doing now, but the video that I'm currently doing now has way better footage than what was available to me during the time that I did this video 5 months ago. But once again, if you want to know about the super plume and more about the volcanoes that will be affected with this split, you really want to look at this one, because we really dive into that part. Some of it I will extract and include in this video, but let's get back to this awesome footage that they have available in this particular article. Hey everyone, I want to make sure I say this before the video even starts. The big thing about this is that there are around 80 plus volcanoes that are in the vicinity of the split. And no one's really talking about that. They're talking about the split, when it might happen. They're showing what's going on. But this is how things used to look. Pangea used to be us. That used to be everyone in the world. And then what happened was they had a pole shift, and then another, and then another. And then you'll see on the very bottom how things are now. So what will happen if there was a pole shift in Africa? Because right now you can fit every country in the world in Africa. Did you know that? That's how big Africa is, and that's how misconstrued the shape is. Let's get in this video. Let's do this. This is a follow-up to the original video that we did as far as Africa splitting, and it's happening in Kenya. And the thing is that we just recently did not recently, it was several months ago that we did a video on Africa splitting. And now it's finally in the mainstream news again. This is a Star Writer article, and it's actually on MSN. It was there as soon as I logged in. I couldn't believe it. And the title is referring to that huge crack that's in Kenya and asking if it could actually split in two. And we actually covered this. Now, they have some really good photos. And once again, we are referencing Stars Insider, that they are the ones that actually were the ones that did this particular article for MSN. And it was just published about 12 hours ago. Now, this particular crack has been noticed for quite some time. It's stated that torrential rainfall and earth tremors was actually the cause of it. Now, there's a 15-meter wide crack that's being identified that's in Kenya. Now, and it states here that they're claiming that the incident is the beginning of a division of Africa, and actually what's going to result from this are actually two continents and a new ocean. Can you believe that? Now, in this particular article, it's stating that on March the 18th, 2018, was when the crack actually first started forming. Now, I'll have to compare this to my other video because there might be different information, but they're stating here in this particular article that March the 18th, 2018, a huge crack began to appear in Africa, where it stated that it was starting to split. And it says it was after a heavy rainfall in the Great Rift Valley region in Kenya. They're stating that this particular crack was covered with volcanic ash, and they were not able to see the crack until afterwards. Now, there are some actual other articles that's going to be tied to this, but we want to show you the gallery of photos that they actually identified, because this is the first time I've ever seen an article of this nature talking about it with so many great photos that's included. Now, the root cause of the actual split, they're stating, is because of the tectonic plates are actually splitting, are moving away from each other. Now, we talk about the different types of boundaries, and this is one of them. It talks about how the plates can actually split apart, and that is what's happening in Africa. Now, here's a better close-up look of that crack that they're talking about. It's gigantic. I mean, there's no possible way to fill this gap, this big, huge crack that's in Africa. I mean, it's actually splitting in two. In our video, we did specify that it was actually occurring in Narok County in Kenya. And it's actually showing you here the result of strong movement of this going on deep inside was actually taking place. It's really ironic how we can look at the layers of the earth and see that this is being affected on the top and on the bottom, all deep within the earth. This is something that's not just happening on the surface. Now this is a really good shot that we didn't have the preview of actually seeing. Once again, this is from Stars Insider. All this footage that you're seeing here, but it's a serious wide-scale damage that they're identifying here. And this is a crack that's over 20 meters wide and 15 meters deep. And this is actually in Mahiu, as I make sure I say it, Mahiu Narok Road. This particular huge crack in Africa is really starting to affect the citizens there, because now they're starting to move away from it because it's growing so much and it's actually affecting their livelihood at this point. I mean, there is no way they can control this. Once again, with Africa splitting like this, there is actually no way that they can actually fill this gap. This is something that's part of nature, and it's one of those things that's just going to happen. One thing that's mentioned in this article is that in Wambui, a couple was so frightened, the family was actually so frightened, because what happened was the crack ended up forming right under their house, and now their house is actually split into two. That was on a previous page in this article here. But I wanted to show you how the people are here, and wow, they saw the ground just open inside of their house, basically, from the tremors that were happening. And this was according to Reuters, talking about the huge crack in Kenya that could split Africa in two. So remember, this would not just be, Africa is not a country, it's a continent. So if it splits, that will actually form another continent that's part of Africa. And also, it wouldn't be part of Africa then. See, that's the thing. Think about it. If it ends up another continent, it may not even be related to Africa again. And what's happening is those adjacent countries would actually have more beachfront property in a sense. And that's something that was identified in the previous video that we did do several months ago about this topic. See, every time it rains and have a serious downpour, this crack is actually getting larger, and also there are other cracks that are starting to form in that region. But this is something that is going on, and they've had a lot of flooding. The whole world has experienced a lot of flooding, and so this area is actually getting affected just like everywhere else right now. But this particular family had to rush and get neighbors to help them to get all of their belongings out of the house, because their house was being devastated by this particular crack. This is a home that was actually destroyed due to the crack forming and moving and enlarging in Africa, because it is splitting. It is, once again, we are going to keep saying this, Africa is splitting into another continent. And this is some devastation that has occurred with some of the homes that was in its path. Geologists by David Adele, he stated that he believed that the fissure had previously been filled with volcanic ash. Now, this was mentioned before, but he's stating it was from Mount Longonot, but that the heavy rains had washed away all that volcanic ash to where this was exposed. It's kind of hard to fathom all of that amount of ash for such a large fissure that people didn't see it or fall into it. I'm not really sure, but that is the information that's being stated in this particular article. They feel that this gigantic crack in Africa actually started very deep in the earth, and that with time it actually traveled up to the surface. And you can see that this is just an absolute amazing photo that they've shown in this article. What a beautiful, beautiful photo there. They did a really great job on this article. I'm going to give props and heads up to this. Like I said, this is Stars Insider's article that mentioned it, but I really had to bring this up in a channel because like I said, is hitting mainstream media, and it feels really great that we at least had some sort of hindsight to put this in our collection of videos. And we just want to make sure that if we see anything else addressing this, that we'll also include it in our actual playlist for this particular topic. Now, we've discussed a lot about the particular tectonic plates that are around. Now, we did mention that, that especially when we talk about places like Greece and Italy, how the African plate, how it's situated, and how there's an Arabian plate and there's an Indian plate that's located here. And the Indian plate was one of those plates that actually slid under the Eurasia plate. That actually, when that happened, there was actually mountain building that occurred. And that's why you have the mountain ranges in this particular area, like the Himalayas and all, because it was an action that happened when that mountain building occurred, when the Indian plate slammed into this particular landmass here. And this is why you see all those earthquakes all along this particular area here. Now, back to the video though, this right here is the area here, and it would actually go around in this particular direction from the Sea of Aden. I believe the Sea of Aden is probably right here, but it actually is like a bow. It's like it curves and it goes around. That's also mentioned in the other video, where you can actually see where the path is going to be taking place. Or then again, it's starting to form different cracks, so we really don't know how this is gonna fare out. Now, as these roads are starting to crack in its path, they are trying to actually fill it up with stones and cement, concrete, to see whether or not that can at least help the situation temporarily, so roads can continue to be open. But as this gets worse, we can imagine what's going to happen is there's just going to be certain roads that may not be able to be used in the future. Now, another volcano that's in the Great Rift Valley, where all of this is occurring, you also have the Suswa volcano that's being mentioned, because it's actually in that Great Rift Valley. Now, they're trying their best to do temporary solutions the best they can in this particular area, and that's what they're addressing here. The highways, the Kenya National Highways Authority has tried their best to make it where roads can continue to be open and people can transport from one area to another. But we don't know, and they don't know, how long these solutions will be able to assist everyone with travel. This is pretty much what we discovered also in our video, is Africa splitting. One thing that we noticed is that they were predicting that this would not actually occur till probably the next tens of millions of years. Now, my question is this. We all know that the tectonic plates have shifted before. At one time we had Pangea. We had all these different phases of the world's crust being arranged in a certain way. Well, what's going to happen if there was a pole shift were to happen? As a lot of people have predicted, that a pole shift is more than likely going to happen, probably, believe it or not, February this coming year. And I've also seen predictions for March the 26th of 2026. So I've seen two different time frames. We don't know one that actually knows, but there are certain signs that are happening now that I don't get into on the channel. I may do it in a Patreon, start doing it in a Patreon. I probably will start doing that. Or either probably do it within the community. But to be honest, I'll probably do it in Patreon. That way, the people that are really interested in the pole shift information can actually converse about it, in Patreon, and I can do different videos about different areas, like I used to do before. I used to do that actually before on YouTube. But the thing is that when it comes to the pole shift, and people can try to run and hide from that particular topic, places like this would be heavily affected if a pole shift situation was to happen, because the pole shift itself will be multiple large earthquakes and a lot of water sloshing. So no, I don't know if it's going to actually, me personally, my opinion, it's just my opinion, I would think that they would have to address the pole shift to really honestly say how this can affect the continent splitting and what shape it would be in after a pole shift. That's something that I don't see being addressed in this particular article or any of the articles. Now, this particular article talks about the range of the crack itself a little differently than the previous video where the research that I had previously done. This one here does talk about the Gulf of Aden, like I mentioned in the other video. And they say it's near Somalia and Zimbabwe, but they don't really go, they just say that this particular area extends 3,000 kilometers from north to south, and it's in between the Gulf of Aden and near Somalia and Zimbabwe. But it doesn't talk about Tanzania like the other article did, and that was dealing with geologists, just like these are geologists that are talking in this particular article. So we're going to see where multiple geologists and experts are going to have different opinions in this, but all we're going to do on this channel is just present to you the information that's out there, and the only opinion that I will have about any of it will be things related to the pole shift, because this is something that's just totally just astronomically large. To talk about is Africa splitting is really a big deal. This is really huge, and it affects a whole bunch of lives. This is a whole country we're talking about, in a continent that would actually be splitting. And there's a lot of countries in Africa. In this article, it just actually is starting to repeat itself, but it's actually showing some very beautiful, beautiful pictures about the huge crack that's actually in Africa, and addressing the is Africa splitting question. And it's really doing a really good job as far as talking about the different ways that this is happening, and they're really simplifying it, because when I first originally looked at it seemed really complicated, or either I'm just starting to understand what I'm looking at. I really get it now. And once again, we have another geologist that is stating pretty much the same thing, as far as the split in the African plate, the split in the African plate that's happening in two different parts, the Nubian plate to the west and the Somali plate to the east. So it's addressing the different tectonic plates in this particular photo. Let's see if we can go ahead and advance this. This is another picture here of that fissure. That crack, my God. So as you see this, you can see some of the cracks are very, very large, but all of them are pretty much very, very deep. That's one thing that we can see here, is that they're extremely deep. And so there's a division in the continent. And it's really, I can't even, after a while, it's going to be how are they going to get from one side to the other, because the crack is just going to be that large. They also explain the lithosphere is subjected to the horizontal forces. It gets stretched and becoming thinner and thinner until a rupture occurs, causing a fissure. So it's telling you exactly how this is actually happening and what the effect of other happening. Now, one of the geologists, Lucia Perez Diaz, addresses the fact that once these cracks and all actually take place, what's going to happen is that it's going to actually create a new ocean based off of Africa splitting. So this is something else. There's a whole bunch of articles and links to this. So like I said, we'll put this, to the best we can, we'll put this into the actual description. This was actually enclosed in when you first open up MSN. So I'll try to see if I can locate a link to be able to put this in the description. If not, then we'll have to just, go with the video. But we are giving credit due to the Stars Insider's work that they did on this particular article. I like to say that Stars Insider did a phenomenal article on this particular topic. When you start talking about whether a continent such as Africa is Africa splitting or not, this is really something that's just not really spoken of a lot. Now, I'm sure a lot of the people that live in Africa know about this. Maybe there's some that aren't. Like I said, there's about 54 countries in Africa. There's no way to know everything that's going on everywhere. But this is really huge. So we're going to hope that This video is actually supported through the international community, so that way they can also advise others if they're unaware of this situation. I would like to say in Africa, make sure you stay strong and stay close to each other and form your communities and tribes together, so that way you can get through this. There's going to be a lot of devastation in a lot of areas. A lot of homes are currently being destroyed from this particular natural event. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next video. And thanks so much for stopping by. Take care. Ciao.